Today we're going to be talking about argument number 5 as we're going through answering the arguments against the Rapture View, trying to go through them one at a time and respond to them and answer them. I call it debunking the debunking of the Rapture View. Anyway, 5 today is people will say that Jesus didn't talk about the rapture. Well, this argument in and of itself is a flawed argument. People will use this argument for a lot of different things and say, well, Jesus didn't speak against that sin, or Jesus didn't talk about this, or Jesus didn't talk about that. And the problem with that argument is that Jesus himself, his name is the Word, we see in John chapter 1. And so the entire Bible, Jesus in his divinity, the entire Bible, the entire Word of God was written by Jesus. So even if it's the Apostle Paul saying something, or Peter or James or any of the authors of the scriptures, it is as though Jesus said it himself. So to say, well, Jesus didn't speak about something, it in and of itself isn't always a good argument or a good approach. And we do see in John chapter 14 that, we say that is a rapture passage. Jesus talks about, he's going to be leaving and he's going to go prepare a place for us, and he's going to come again and receive us to himself, that where he is, there we may be also. That we say is a picture of the rapture. We're being, received to him and going with him to where he is now, which is heaven. At the second coming, he will be coming to the earth. There will not be a reception and going, back to heaven at that time. And a lot of things come to play as far as your view of a literal or non-literal millennial kingdom and things like that, as to how you interpret these things. But anyway, that would be one passage where we say Jesus was actually talking about the rapture there. But the critics and the argument would be, well, he didn't specifically talk about a pre-tribulational rapture. And I just want to go back to the Olivet Discourse in Matthew chapter 24. And for some reason, even those that are really strong in their rapture view beliefs, a lot of theologians will concede that Matthew chapter 24 is talking to the Jews, that he's not really talking to the church, and there's no mention of the rapture there, and the one taken, one left language that Jesus uses is not the rapture, but is the second coming and people being taken in judgment. And that's what they always say, one taken, one left, one taken, one left. They say the ones that are taken in judgment. And I've never understood, I've always kind of understood that why do we shy away from that being, rapture talk, when the disciples themselves are part of the church? Yes, the second coming is a Jewish prophecy, the Messiah and the second coming and all of that. But the disciples are the beginning of the church. The apostles are the beginning of the church. And so I don't know why we feel like Jesus can't be talking about the rapture here. I feel that it's obvious that he's talking about the rapture. Just the idea that the second coming, when he comes in power and glory and judgment and battle, the whole idea that he would describe taking people away in judgment as one taken, one left, one taken, one left, just doesn't make any sense to me. One taken, one left is emphasizing the idea that somebody continues on doing what they were doing. And so one taken, in judgment, and then when you put it together with the other scriptures about the second coming, it's just like it just seems like a nonsensical way to describe, I'm going to come and I'm going to take these people away into judgment. why would you say, well, two will be grinding in the field, one will be gone? Um, it doesn't seem like that is a valid way to um, just talk about it if they're just being taken in judgment. And so it does seem to me to be him talking about the rapture. Some of the reasons, like I believe that, is in Matthew chapter 24, he literally talks about his second coming, you know, up through verses, I don't know, 31. And he uses the language of the second coming when he's talking about it. He says, "For as lightning comes from the east and flashes to the west, so also will the coming of the Son of Man be." And then he jumps into a transitional thing after he finishes describing his second coming. He kind of pauses and does the parable of the fig tree. He begins to talk about being watchful and the imminency of his return, which would, to me, would be the rapture, the 1 Thessalonians 4:16 and 17 part of his return, where we're watching, and we not all of these events have to occur and we see the second coming boom happen after these events happen, but it could happen at any moment. And I think that's a picture of the rapture. And so when he begins to talk about that, that's when he brings in this language: one taken, one left, one taken, one left. So I feel like Jesus did talk directly about the rapture. Um, Now it's interesting. I heard a pastor say just a couple weeks ago, and this is a pastor that I respect but disagree with on this particular item, but was saying, well, when he read this, you know, it helped him not believe in the rapture because, the language is, oh, where the body is, the vultures are. And he says vultures doesn't sound like people being taken, away to heaven. Um, well, it's interesting because in Matthew chapter 24, Jesus uses that phrase with the vultures, and I've talked about this on another video. If you want to go see another take that I have on it, but Jesus talks about the vultures. I would say the eagles is the way it's translated in the King James, but verse 28 of Matthew 24, "For wherever the carcass is, there the eagles will be gathered." It's interesting. He says that here right after saying, "As lightning flashes from the east to the west, so will the coming of the Son of Man be." And this lightning flashes and stars falling from heaven and the powers of heaven shaken and the tribes of the earth mourning, and that is a view, that is a particular description of the second coming. And so here he uses that statement right after the second coming, not after the pause and beginning to talk about being watchful and the one taken, one left, one taken, one left. He doesn't bring it up there. And it's interesting, that word, and it says wherever the carcass is, there the eagles will be gathered, or there the vultures will be gathered. And that vultures is probably a good way to translate that for what he's saying there, because of the dead bodies. But he uses the word toma in the Greek for body, lifeless, dead body. It could be translated where the corpses are. And that's literally what he says here. I find it very interesting, yet yes, that doesn't seem to be that is a view of the Battle of Armageddon and the vultures gathering to feast on the bodies of all those that had gone to war against God and his people. But in Luke 17, he uses that exact same phrase in a different way and in a different setting. So in Luke 17, we're not talking about the Olivet Discourse. We're not in the Olivet Discourse. He's talking to the Pharisees, and the Pharisees are wanting a sign of his second coming. So he basically, doesn't give them the answer that they're looking for. And then he has a short conversation with his disciples about it. And here again, he starts off talking about, what the second coming will be like. And he will say, for as lightning flashes out from one part of heaven and shines to another part of heaven, so also will the Son of Man will be in his day. And so he's literally talking about the second coming there, lightning flashing from the east to the west type language. But here he doesn't go directly into saying where the bodies are, that's where the eagles or vultures will be gathered. Here he doesn't go into saying that. Here he has a pause again. And he says, but first, he must suffer many things and be rejected by this generation. Uh, and then he starts what I believe is describing what it will be like with the rapture. And it's interesting when he finishes up here talking about one taken, one left, one taken, one left, then he uses that same phrase again, curiously, which when I first began studying this, it would be like, well, maybe everybody's right. Maybe he is just only talking about the second coming here. I still can't get past the language of one taken, one left, one taken, one left, because that just doesn't fit him coming in fiery judgment and one taken, one left. It's like life goes on as usual. When his foot hits the Mount of Olives, nothing on the earth will ever be the way it was again. The Mount of Olives will itself split from the east to the west, and the river system will be changed. The earth will be changed. Everybody, and there will be a gathering of everybody for the sheep and goats judgment. But it's not a picture of one taken, one left. It's a picture of all those that survive, that weren't part of the Battle of Armageddon, but they had rejected Christ. They will stand in the sheep and the goats judgment. And so there's a gathering of them on the earth for that. And so it's a different picture than, one taken, one left, one taken, one left. So I still couldn't get past that. But it's interesting. I started looking at this. He says that phrase here again after one taken, one left, and the disciples ask him, question you and I would probably would ask him is like, taken where? Jesus, where are they taken? And then he uses this same phrase that he used in associated with his second coming in Matthew chapter 24, which can throw you off a little bit. But he answered them and he said, wherever the body is, there the eagles will be gathered. But he changes the phrase a little bit. Just a little bit. I think it's a subtle understanding of this passage. That hearing you may hear, and seeing, you may see, but not hear and not understand. I believe Jesus has a way of wanting us to understand what he's saying, and for those of us that want to dig for it and understand, and I know a lot of people say, oh, you're just trying to, force it in here, but it just seems to be a lot more to it than that. Here, he changes the word. Why would he change the word from dead bodies to soma? Not dead bodies, corpses, but just bodies, or your body. And the idea is that it's a living body. It could be a resurrected body. The root of the word is actually preserved. It's like, it's a time of a preserved body being resurrected and living bodies going where? To the air. Interesting, that word eagles, comes from the root word aer, which literally means air. So, it's translated eagles, but there's this focus of it's the eagles that gather in the air, the vultures that gather in the air in Matthew chapter 24 are gathering for the dead bodies at the Battle of Armageddon. But it's like Jesus here is saying in a different context, where are they taken? Lord?" the disciples ask, and Jesus uses the same phrase in a different way, and it kind of means a different thing. I believe he literally is giving a clue to the rapture here, which was something that the disciples didn't understand or didn't need to understand at this point. But basically, where the bodies are, where the living bodies are, where the resurrected bodies are, where the reserved bodies are, that's where the eagles will be gathered in the air. So, I don't know. But it's very interesting to me that it is broken down this way, and he uses different language in a different setting at a different time of his explanation, talking about the second coming. So anyway, that's the argument. Jesus didn't, talk about the rapture. I feel that he did. It's not a valid argument anyway, because if it's in the Bible at all, Jesus talked about it. You could say Jesus wrote 1 Thessalonians 4:16 and 17 through Paul. So he did talk about it. And so that's the argument that I would make for that. Anyway, God bless.